Yeah, back on Live from the Heartland on a Saturday morning, like we hear every Saturday morning. And we have some great guests just re-entered the studio, Salome Chasnoff and Allie, who I'm going to have you...
Pat Savis.
Pat Savis, yes, thank you. I appreciate that help there, Tom. Salome is an old friend and was on the show with me a long time ago when we were neighbors on Glenwood Avenue, I think.
What was the topic? Do you remember?
I think we were talking about getting books to women in prison.
That could be.
And also some video or work that you were doing at the time.
Yeah, we did. We had a women in prison program at Beyond Media, and for many years For many years we had a traveling installation, a series of short videos. We used to do workshops with women in prison and with women emerging from prison. We had a really active, dynamic website that's still happening, womeninprison.org.
Womeninprison.org. Such important work, and I, so grateful I was to be able to just take some reading material for the women in prison. And you've always done important stuff. So now here we are with a documentary that you're doing, working on the representation of disability in cinema.
Yeah.
Talk to us about that.
Yeah, well, Susan Nussbaum, who's a local playwright, novelist, great activist, culture worker. Mm-hmm. She and I worked for many years together when she was at Access Living, and she founded and facilitated a group called the Empowered Fifis. It was young women with disabilities, and it was a support and advocacy group. And Beyond Media, which I was kind of the lead on, we partnered with Susan and did a series of short videos with the girls about growing up disabled, about sex. I mean, people with disabilities are summarily excluded from sex education in schools. Yeah. You'll never see almost never see sex scenes in a movie with a disabled person, which Allie will be happy to talk about, I'm sure. So anyway, we were working together and we were in a groove and we loved it. And Susan had this idea that movies shape how we think about disability. So how not just non-disabled people think about people with disabilities, but about how people with disabilities think about themselves. And so we started doing mashups. She, Carrie Sandahl, Allie, myself, started doing mashups and screening them at salons with people from communities. A lot of people with disabilities.
What's a mashup?
A collection of clips around.
A montage.
Montage. Yeah.
In the previous
mashup. Now it's a mashup.
Montage sounds much more
exotic.
Sounds foreign to me. I like the mashup.
Yeah, montage. I mean, I'm a filmmaker. I should say montage, but yeah. So we started doing montages around different themes. Blind men and women, like a gender analysis. Cure, so like how disabled characters always end up getting killed or cured or institutionalized, somehow recuperated back into the system. So, and these events they were on fire. Mm-hmm. People were so overwhelmed by how true the conversation was vis-a-vis their lives.
Wow.
Yeah, and I think, something...
Ellie, step up to the mic.
Yeah, I think something really powerful happens, whether we call it mashups or montages, when you take a series of clips and you see the same thing happening over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. When you string 10, 15 clips where a disabled character is getting cured or more often killed, it does something to the audience. And wow. So to be in a room with a bunch of other disabled people responding to that and processing that and talking back to that, I think we realized that we had something really powerful there.
Can you just speak to what a couple of the themes besides the cure or die thing that came out from these mashups and the conversations that followed showing them?
Yeah, so we were really intentional about not doing these mashups around specific disabilities, because part of what we're trying to do is show sort of the ways that some of these themes cross-cut individual impairments. We started with having a section on intellectual disabilities, and then quite quickly realized that part of what we were trying to do was show the similarities across blindness and intellectual disability, and so then we started organizing things around a race analysis, right? So looking at the history of disabilities use around and as a tool to sort of send messages about race relations, to make sort of threatening, particularly African American men, seem less threatening in a movie script by giving them a disability. And so we started to kind of unpack that a little bit.
I imagine you did that with gender as well.
We did,
yeah. Like with the race issue, especially after World War II, when African American men were starting to be, become part of the working society, there was a need to reduce the threat of that.
You know, I have a list of films here that I got from you, and in it you say these films distort, sentimentalize, demonize, demean, and outright lie about the experience of disability in America. And I was wondering, I was thinking about that, one of my favorite actors, although I have a real hard time with his politics, is Jon Voight. And what was the film he was in?
Coming Home.
Coming Home.
Or Midnight Cowboy.
Coming
Both.
No, I'm thinking about
Both of them.
but Coming Home is the one I was thinking about.
Yeah.
Is that guilty of the same stuff, or was that a better version? I forget who was the other.
Well, here's the thing. We're a bunch of sort of angry, curmudgeon-y film critic, disabled people, so we're all going to say they're all terrible, they all do something wrong. But that only gets us so far. So there are pieces of films where we're like, that worked, even though it's embedded in a much larger story that has very significant problems. So that that film in particular, Coming Home, is sort of cited, I think, by a lot of people in the disability community as having one of the best sex scenes. That actually
Sex scenes? Yeah, what made me think of is when you said the way that people with disability didn't get sex education. And I remember being with someone who was around all those people who were in that movie.
Yeah.
And she was saying they were getting a lot of sex at that time.
Yeah, well, no comment there. But, the film did something really important by showing a disabled man having a sexual desire and a real sort of, Matt Fraser, I think, talked about this in our interview that we did just last week, talked about actually what it meant to see a really open negotiation around disability and sexuality in a way that felt very honest to people viewing it.
So what's wrong with Forrest Gump? And can you unpack that frame for us a little bit?
Everything.
Oh my, yeah,
So much.
So much.
Great soundtrack.
That is true.
That happens.
Like I said, there's always something redeeming. Well, Forrest Gump, there's a lot of things wrong with that film. It's this kind of expose about a man with an intellectual disability that just sort of like haphazardly moves through the world, having social events happen to him, in a way that he becomes sort of the brunt of jokes, in ways that are, I don't know how to put this nicely, that troubling. I'll leave it there.
No, you don't have to be nice here. It's all right.
It flattens out a form of sort of really rich, people's really rich lives, and sends messages about intellectual disability as this sort of caricature.
Yeah, I think that particularly with men and intellectual disabilities, there's a tradition that these people don't have any control over their lives.
Right.
They don't have sexual control. They don't have control over their violent impulses. I think Lenny in Mice and Men is a perfect example of that.
And the story of Forrest Gump sort of says they don't need control.
Right. The story of Forrest Gump says you can just bump along in life and be in the middle of history-making moments ad nauseum. I have friends who are absolutely vitriolic about Forrest Gump.
Yeah.
Helena Bonham Carter, in the film with, I'm not going to remember the name. Do you know what I'm talking about, Salome? No.
Let's move on.
All right, then. I'll try and remember.
Let's talk about $1 Million Baby.
Thank you.
Good.
Go ahead. I never
Yeah,
saw
because
it.
one of the things we want to do, one of the things we're going to be doing with our Kickstarter money is we're going to be going down to Kansas and interviewing Katie Dallum, who is an artist living in Kansas, former boxer on whose life many people feel $1 Million Baby was based. She didn't kill herself. She's alive and well.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And in the movie, that's,
And in the
sorry,
movie-
that's, I never saw
Yeah,
it.
spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned Kickstarter. You are making a film, and we
We are.
haven't mentioned the name of it. Isn't it called Code of the
It
Freaks?
is
Code of the Freaks.
And now tell us about your film project. And assuming you're going to get funding, you're already doing interviews.
Yeah.
What's the theme? How long is it going to be? How do we make it a big success?
Well, it's a feature documentary, so in the neighborhood of 60 to 90 minutes, and we're interviewing people across the spectrum of, in terms of disability, in terms of race, gender, their role in the disability community. The continuous thing is that everybody that's being interviewed is from within the disability community: artists, activists, scholars. As Ali mentioned, Matt Fraser, we interviewed him last week. He's in town for a show at the MCA. He's famous for his role in American Horror Story. Katie Dallum, Reva Lair, who's a very well-known, internationally known artist here in Chicago. Lawrence Carter Long, who's a media specialist. Teki Lumnicki, Mike Irvin, on and on.
Do you cover, as part of the disability community, is bipolar in there too?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, is
Yeah,
that, I
so-
mean, that's a big one.
Yeah.
Seems
Well,
pretty widespread.
I think, sort of back to the point, this is one of the areas that we sort of collected clips around psychiatric disabilities, and I think more broadly than any specific impairment like bipolar, but we're sort of grouping those representations together and looking at what depictions of mental illness look like in films, and having people sort of talk back to that. A lot of people ask us why this film matters, right? And especially at a time in this political climate, right? But
More than ever.
more than ever, yeah, more than ever. By some statistics, as many as 1 in 5 people in the U.S. are living, or in the world, are living with a disability. And yet, so given those statistics, like, disability rights and disability justice really shouldn't be hard sells, right? But they are, and why are they? Because in a lot of ways, when you think about disability, you think about Tom Cruise in Born on the 4th of July, or Hilary Swank in $1 Million Baby. You don't think about your grandmother or your brother or your sister who have a variety of different types of disabilities. And so that's one of the things we're trying to do by looking at all of this sort of vast array of representations.
And also how these images are used to construct a certain idea about disability that's actually not true. So in other words, how they're, for the benefit of the film narrative, they're used as plot devices to either to transform the character with disability, so they become wise, they become good, they become, so, and yet, so in this scenario, disabled characters are props. We don't see them as fully human. And it has an effect on how people with disabilities see themselves and how people, able-bodied people, see them.
What an important light to shine on this subject. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
And where can people find the page to support the film?
We have a page, a movie page on Facebook, Code of the Freaks.
Code of the Freaks.
We have,
Cool name.
we have, yeah, it comes from the Todd Browning film Freaks.
Yep.
We have a website, codeofthefreaks.com, and we have a Kickstarter page.
Right.
You go to Code of the Freaks documentary on Kickstarter, you'll find us pretty easily.
And this is a groundbreaking film. There's not a lot of other really
There's
work
nothing
been
like
done
it.
on this.
There's nothing like it from within the disability community.
Salome, Chasnoff, Ali, Patsavis, continue your great work.
Thank you so much.
And I hope you
Thank
have
you.
much success. I hope
Thank
to see you
you.
on a
Thank you.
stage on my TV,
Getting a big award.
getting a big award. Exactly.
From your
As
lips
we-
to her ears.
Exactly. All right.
Thank you
We are,
guys.
you are listening to Live from the Heartland. We're going to have a little musical break.